have to worry about it. I mean, as you know, California already has drought water problems as it is.
Well, that's because all the illegals are drinking the water up.
Okay, I want to mention real quick that I'm using the term liberal in this video the way it's used here in America, which means someone left of the left-right political spectrum. And I'm painting with this broad brush because in politics today, even moderate liberals will generally support a full-blown leftist over a conservative. The Kavanaugh fiasco proved that. Now, how do liberals ruin a great, wealthy, thriving American city like San Francisco? Well, the quick and dirty answer is their policies, and their policies reflect their ideology. And when your ideology is garbage, everything that comes from it is garbage. It's the garbage in, garbage out principle. And you know, if you look at those policies objectively, you really have to come to the conclusion that liberals really don't think their ideas through. They don't think ahead. They have a child's view of how the world works. What progressive policies have recently done to Western Europe is a good visual. And the further left you go, the more insane the policies they want to enact are. Like wanting to abolish ICE, having open borders and no immigration restrictions at all. When I first heard there were people who actually advocated for this, I honestly thought they had to be trolls, because no one could possibly be that obtuse. But I was wrong, and San Francisco's sanctuary city policies show that it's not just a few people who advocate for this insanity. 1 billion people on this planet live in abject poverty, live on less than $1 a day. Another 2 billion live on less than $2 a day. Should we bring half the world's population here and support them? And if not, how many is too many? What's the number? When exactly should we begin enforcing our borders again?
An illegal alien from El Salvador getting a 6-figure payout from taxpayers courtesy of the city of San Francisco. Like many places in California, San Francisco is a sanctuary city. It pledges not to turn illegals over to the feds for deportation. Despite that policy, though, Pedro Figueroa Zarcino, he's an illegal alien from El Salvador, says police reported him to ICE when he visited a police station 2 years ago. He sued the city after that, and this week officials agreed to pay him $190,000 for the indignity of having the law enforced against him in a country he's not supposed to be in.
Now, due to detrimental left-wing economic policies like having an attitude towards spending, like a 1980s Valley girl at the mall with daddy's Amex card, San Francisco is billions of dollars in debt. So what does newly elected Mayor London Breed do about it? Well, she signs the largest budget ever, a record $11 billion budget, which includes a pay raise for all city workers, including, of course, herself. So now over 800 San Francisco city executives are making more than California's governor, who makes $200,000 a year. Mayor Breed makes $336,000 a year, which makes her the highest paid mayor in the U.S., and which is $70,000 more than what the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court makes. By the way, San Francisco is ranked the nation's most liberal city. In the nation's most conservative city, Mesa, Arizona, the mayor makes $74,000 a year. Some other exorbitant salaries in San Francisco include the Public Utilities Commission manager, who makes $359,000 a year, and the police chief makes $330,000 a year. And remember, liberals are the ones constantly complaining that corporations pay their executives too much. As if that's any of their business. Also, let's see. The fire chief also makes $333,000 a year. And San Francisco's retirement fund chief made $545,000 in pay last year. There are also 500 lower-level city workers that made over $200,000 in 2017 after premium pay incentives were added in. That's a total of 1,300 San Francisco city employees who made more than the governor of California did last year. Overall, the median pay for full-time city employees last year was $97,300. In all, San Francisco will spend $5 billion on employee salaries and benefits this fiscal year, which is about 45% of the total city budget. Liberals love being generous with other people's money. and that's why California has the highest state and local taxes in the nation. Utility prices are the highest in the nation. California also has the highest gasoline tax in the nation and the highest gas prices. And when moving to California, expect to pay $1,500 just to register your car. California also has the highest poverty rate in the nation, and over 1/3 of the nation's welfare recipients are in California, even though just 12% of the U.S. population is in California. California teachers are the highest paid in the nation, yet California schools ranks about the worst in the nation. California students rank 48th out of 50 in math and 49th in reading.
Tough times in Stockton, California, with that city, the largest one ever to file for bankruptcy. And city officials are saying it was tough but necessary. Stockton is one of 3 cities now to declare bankruptcy in the state. According to Vice Mayor Kathy Miller, public safety employees were costing the city, on average, more than $150,000 each per year. We heard about that hefty benefit package there and for those employees. How did it get to that point where they were able to collect so much?
You know, it happened incrementally over about a 10-year period and during the 1990s. And Stockton's not alone in this. Cities all across our state especially really ramped up enhanced pensions and increased benefits. And one of the benefits that Stockton granted to its employees, which ended up really being the largest single problem that we have financially, is we granted free lifetime medical benefits to our retirees.
Wow.
You were a successful man in California. Were you driven out by taxes?
Well, you could say I'm a political and economic refugee in Texas. I used to work in the aerospace industry before I was elected to the legislature in 2004. We had plenty of huge aerospace headquarters in California. All the major headquarters have now left the state because of a combination of the California tax policy and regulatory policy. They just found that they couldn't make as much money in California compared to if they moved somewhere else. And so my client base vanished, and therefore it was kind of hard to do what I used to do for a living when I was termed out of the legislature in 2010.
But the culture is really different in California to Texas. I mean, it's almost like day and night. It's like you're living in a different country. Have you adopted and adapted to the new culture in Texas?
Well, absolutely. It's a very freedom-oriented culture. And to your point, on a hunch, when I moved to Texas and started work for the Texas Public Policy Foundation, I did a survey of the occupations of the majority that was in charge in each state legislature. And as I suspected, I found that somewhere around 85% of the Republicans who were in the majority in the state legislature in Texas were in business, ranching, they were doctors, they were people who worked for a living. In California, what I found was that same percentage was about 18% versus about 85% in Texas. And the rest of the majority Democrats in California, what they did for a living in the legislature before they became elected, they were roughly 1/3 community organizers, plaintiffs' attorneys, and government staffers. Oh. And so as a result, they brought a different life experience. They brought a different attitude toward their legislative duties. And that's one of the reasons why California has among the highest taxes in the country. In fact, I did a study looking at the 15 biggest states, and you see a very tight correlation between the big tax states like California and New Jersey and Connecticut and New York, and the low tax states like Texas and Florida. You see a big correlation between Americans moving out of those big tax states into the low tax states.
Chuck.
Now, of course, big government, overspending, and high taxes isn't enough for liberal politicians because they need to appease their voter base, which are the anti-capitalists, the extremist environmentalists, the global warming, carbon tax, social justice warrior, neo-Marxist nuts. And that means creating an anti-business environment. So from 2008 to 2015, over 9,000 companies left California due to the hostile business climate. And if high taxes and extreme overregulation isn't enough to scare a business away, California is a free-for-all for frivolous lawsuits against businesses. California ranks worst in the nation for amount of damages awarded, second worst for judges' fairness, and the worst for treatment of class action lawsuits, according to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce.
Companies leave for three primary reasons: high taxes, excessive regulations, and the threat of really ridiculous lawsuits.
And they are leaving for places like Arizona, a state that means business. Arizona's fast-track permitting allows certified architects and engineers in Phoenix to get building permits in a single day. By contrast, Dwayne Woods will tell you that California's process is painfully slow. As the former executive at Waste Management, the largest recycling company in the world, Woods moved his regional headquarters from California to Arizona.
We started trying to permit a major recycling facility in LA, at an old landfill site, mind you. That site is still not permitted to this day.
How long has that taken?
Over 10 years.
And after a decade, there is still no facility in California. Yet it took just 2 years to build the same plant in Arizona.
If you took a whiteboard and said, how can we make it difficult? How many agencies can we layer on? California's as complex as it can be. It's not an employer-friendly state to that, and it's to that end, it's more difficult, definitely more costly to operate in.
Of all states, California ranks dead last for policy friendliness, with key negatives for high taxes, high workers' compensation costs, and high electricity costs.
All the green policies, essentially, renewable mandates.
Renewable mandates are for solar and wind and other things which are higher cost, and because California's imposed that on their energy industries, costs are higher in California than in Texas. Is that
That's right, about
50%
higher in California.
50% higher.
Yeah, and they're going up.
KPIX 5 News begins with tourists turning away from the city by the bay. A major convention pulls out of San Francisco, saying its members don't feel safe on the streets. Good evening, I'm Elizabeth Cook.
I'm Alan Martin. Locals know it and visitors are shocked by it. The reality of San Francisco streets is a far cry from its postcard image. Now the city just lost out on a huge moneymaker.
But now comes word that a major medical association has pulled its $40 million convention out of the city over the state of the streets.
The convention felt that the streets of San Francisco are not a place that a lot of their delegates wanted to come to.
And the canceling medical group is not alone.
A number of groups are concerned about the condition of the streets in San Francisco and saying, we don't know if they're safe, they're dirty, we don't know if we want to meet here.
And it's not just businesses that are leaving California. Due to the high cost of living, high taxes, high crime, bad schools, and an endless flood of illegal immigrants, there's a mass exodus of the working and middle class.
A new survey shows a significant number of Bay Area renters want out, and it's not just the cost of living that has them looking elsewhere. KPIX 5's Jackie Ward joins us now with the details. Jackie?
Michelle, there have been reports in the past that have said millennials plan on leaving the Bay Area in the next few years for a variety of reasons. But according to ApartmentList.com, a site that helps renters find homes, 83% of people want to leave, and that number got our attention.
More people are leaving San Francisco than any other city in the United States. That's according to Redfin.
Thinking of leaving the Bay Area? It might be harder to find a U-Haul than to find your next home. KPIX 5's Kit Doe tells us so many people are moving out, it's creating a major shortage of moving vans.
If you think living in the Bay Area is expensive, try leaving it. Everywhere you look, there are signs people are fleeing the region's sky-high housing prices. For instance, U-Haul. U-Haul trucks are leaving in droves, taking one-way trips out and not coming back.
A survey tells us most of those are lower income, some middle income. Residents fed up with housing costs and taxes headed to lower-cost states like Nevada, Arizona, and Texas. For Romero, it's either Arizona or Nevada, where she plans to buy a house.
I would love to buy, but you know, if I put myself to buy here, I could probably make it, but then, you know, I don't know if I'd be able to eat or throw myself a 50th birthday party.
Michael Chen, 10 News.
Gotta have that party. Experts say that loss of population could hurt because we lose the tax base and skilled workers.
This one, a record number of Californians leaving the formerly Golden State. They're heading for Texas. How many people are we talking about?
Well, overall, it's 250,000 have left between 2013 and 14. The first destination, though, for more than 33,000 of them is Texas. So, you know, that's a big deal because because basically California has a big welfare state, and they've just been making moves that are really hurting businesses there. So the fact that they're bringing these individuals, are bringing, get this, $2.2 billion in adjusted gross income into Texas. Texas is loving it right now.
I'll bet they are. Yeah.
No income tax.
That's right. No state income tax.
Exactly.
Got it.
But wait, there's more to this perfect storm of destruction that's brewing in the liberal utopia of San Francisco. Since liberals are notoriously soft on crime because law and order to them is not compassionate, crime in San Francisco is out of control. Here's an example of this lunacy. The person who won the Democratic primary to be the next district attorney of Suffolk County, Massachusetts, is promising to bring progressive reform to the Boston office, which means eliminating bail for criminals placed under arrest, decriminalizing drug possession, drug dealing, shoplifting, and larceny under $250. I'm sure that's going to work out great for the local business owners who just love when people steal from them. Now back to San Francisco. In San Francisco, when gangs of criminals commit mass muggings on subways, the city doesn't warn or inform the public or even release the video because, wait for it, and I quote, it might paint minorities in a bad light. I kid you not.
That's why some say San Francisco is putting political correctness over public safety. Riders say if they knew that gangs of young men were assaulting riders over several months, next time they got on, you'd get off. A 911 call in Oakland.
30 kids board my train, beat up someone, rob them, and then run off the train.
That someone? Rusty Stapp.
Approximately 30 of them invaded our car, beat, robbed a number of us individuals.
Cameras captured the incident.
If something happens on board a car, police can pull it. We now have video of you.
The individuals that they saw on video were repeat offenders. They knew who these people were.
Yet BART refused to release the video of the mob attack, claiming,
when it is involving juveniles, as these last two incidents have occurred, the police department makes the determination that there is not a public interest in sending all that information out.
But that's not the whole story.
I had uncovered a memo that had indicated that they may want to withhold releasing video for fear of creating racial stereotyping.
That internal memo says releasing tape of the crime would, quote, unfairly affect and characterize riders of color, leading to sweeping generalizations in media reports and a high level of racially insensitive commentary.
I think it is important for the writing public to see some of the ways that people steal things, assault people on the train.
Assault, robbery, and rape are up 41% on BART. Theft, 14%.
There is a ton of drug use out in the open.
Amy Lander's car has been broken into twice this year.
When it happened the second time, this window was completely shattered. There was glass everywhere.
According to FBI data, San Francisco has the highest property crime rate of the nation's top 50 cities, with about half the cases being smash and grabs. But others blame the city's politicians, legal do-gooders, and a city full of residents willing to accept the deterioration on the streets in the name of political correctness.
And I hope the people of San Francisco are finally starting to understand what has been created here by a very small group of lunatic politicians who still control a majority of that Board of Supervisors. It's disgraceful.
San Francisco has a long history of tolerance, which has made it a magnet for the homeless and mentally ill. But tolerance has a price.
Car break-ins are so prevalent the police now only accept the reporting of those crimes online. And the public has to resort to putting signs in their cars asking criminals nicely not to smash in their windows and steal their shit. In 2017, there were over 30,000 car break-ins reported. By the way, in 2011, there were fewer than 11,000. So the frequency has tripled over a 6-year span. And from 2011 to 2017, only 13 of the 82,000 cases filed led to arrests. It's a free-for-all, folks. And when a news agency set up a bait car to report on this crime wave, not only did their bait car get broken into, but while the crew was chasing the thieves, someone else broke into their crew truck, which was not a bait car. Again, I kid you not.
Unbelievably, when we were inside conducting the interview, thieves came out here and they broke into our crew truck. They stole thousands of dollars worth of our equipment, so we actually got hit twice. in one day.
There's an old adage, you get what you allow. And that adage explains why wealthy San Francisco's streets are littered with drug needles and human feces, why there are masses of homeless people who have set up camp in the public right-of-way, why people are shooting up drugs in public, and why dead junkies are found in front of elementary schools.
Well, the Democratic stronghold of San Francisco has become, well, especially in downtown, a festering pile of garbage, feces, and drug needles, according to a survey by a local news station.
We aired a video last night that showed vagrants shooting up or lying passed out in their own vomit in the middle of a BART, a train station, right downtown outside the Civic Center, 2 blocks from Twitter headquarters. Local reporters have found needles and human feces on every single block in downtown San Francisco.
Picking up needles in San Francisco has become a full-time job. In fact, the city is hiring.
Every month, us and our partners at the city collect 275,000 syringes.
But it's still not addressing the real issue, which is that people are living on the street, they're leaving their needles, and that they're defecating and urinating everywhere.
In fact, yesterday, Tamara called 311 twice to report human feces in front of her business.
Dr. Lee Riley is an infectious disease expert at UC Berkeley.
The fecal matter could possibly get into air, and if you happen to inhale that, it can also go into your intestine.
Which can be deadly, especially for children. Dr. Riley has researched some of the dirtiest slums in the world, but believes contamination levels in parts of San Francisco may now be even worse.
Much higher than what we see in places like Brazil or Kenya or India.
And we've always had chronic homelessness, but never to this extent. And it's really, the bottom line is, it's with the liberal permissive policies that have encouraged more homeless to not only camp out in San Francisco, but be very aggressive in terms of their behavior without any repercussions.
The reports are that not all the homeless do this, but a lot of them expose themselves and do things in public that are gross, and it's a public health issue, and tourists are assaulted by panhandlers, and the property crime is through the roof. All of that true?
It is true, and I will tell you myself, 2 weeks ago, downtown at 9 a.m. in the morning in Union Square, which is the main shopping area, a homeless man dropped his pants, turned around, and proceeded to urinate and spray all over me.
And what did you say to that man?
There's nothing I could do. I couldn't call the police because the police will not come. They'll tell you, was anybody injured? If no one is injured, they will not respond.
So
there is nothing you can do.
So that kind of extreme behavior is now normal for San Francisco?
Well, it's pretty uncivilized, but is becoming the norm because the homeless now are more defiant because they realize that there are no repercussions for this.
Right.
Homelessness all over the headlines this week, and this evening we are going to answer a question that many of you have been asking for years now. If San Francisco spends nearly $250 million on the homeless every year, why are there still thousands of people living on the street?
So San Francisco hasn't had a Republican elected office for multiple decades now. And so none of the problems that we could see in terms of the homeless here can be attributed to the Republicans at all in San Francisco, simply because we don't have a single Republican elected to office representing San Francisco. The homeless epidemic that we have right here is just getting worse.
But I also am asking a more basic question about what the leaders of the city care about. If you walk to work and you see people degrading themselves, defecating on the street, shooting up, why wouldn't that horrify you to the point that you would drop what you're doing and fix it? And instead, they're lecturing the rest of us about how we're immoral because we don't want more illegal aliens in the state of California. It just seems like their priority is totally backward. They don't care about their own people. Why wouldn't you reach that conclusion? I mean, look, think about it in terms of your own children. If you said to your kids, like, you can't do that. You're just not, you know what, how about this? You're not allowed to shoot heroin on the street. I don't care. Maybe you go to someone else's county who will put up with this crap, but we're not putting up with it. Everyone here on Market Street, like, you're gone. What? That's really simple. Well, you would do that with your own children. Why aren't you doing it with your own people?
Tucker's solution there sounds overly simplistic, but he actually hit the nail right on the head because the solutions to those problems are not complex. And I'm not just talking smack here because I do know a little something about this. And it boils down to, like I said, you get what you put up with. I've lived in St. Petersburg, Florida for 26 years. Actually, before I go any further, I want to interject and mention a couple of things I think might be important to know when comparing two very different cities and states. First, the cost of living in St. Pete is relatively low. The biggest factor that makes it lower than average in America is housing costs. The average price of a studio here is about $640 a month, although you can find one for $500. For a one-bedroom apartment, it's about $740, and for that same one-bedroom in San Francisco, it's $4,000 a month. I mention this because no, the cost of housing or living is not why there are so many homeless people in San Francisco. St. Pete has way more homeless per capita, and I just have to add, as where California has the highest state taxes in the nation, up to 13.5% of your income, Florida state taxes are 0. We don't have a state income tax. Second, the city budget of St. Petersburg averages $600 million a year. And although the population of St. Pete is just a third of San Francisco's population, when comparing our budget to the $11 billion San Francisco budget, it really shows the lunacy of liberal economics. Multiply our budget by 3 to normalize the population, and you get 1.8 billion, not 11 billion. Also, St. Petersburg isn't a smaller city per se. In square miles, it's 3 times the size of San Francisco, and of course the budget allocated to the homeless in my city is just a fraction of the $250 million San Francisco spends on their homeless each year. Which brings me to politics in St. Pete, which is much different than in San Francisco. Definitely much further to the right, but I think the best way to describe it is moderate, but with certain conservative principles and values assumed. For example, Florida is overwhelmingly pro-gun across party lines, and you can conceal carry a firearm in any city in Florida. And an example of our local political climate is, our current mayor is a Democrat. But he's not a leftist, and interestingly, when a Democrat runs for mayor here in St. Petersburg, it's not unusual for some prominent local Republicans to endorse him, and vice versa. Last year, in our last mayoral election, several Democratic city council members backed the Republican incumbent, as did former mayor David Fisher, a registered Democrat. Now, like I was saying, I've lived in St. Petersburg since the early 90s, and St. Pete has about the same amount of homeless as San Francisco, about 7,000. Also, I mentioned St. Petersburg has fewer people than San Francisco, so per capita, we have way more homeless people, but in 26 years, I don't ever remember seeing a drug needle on the street. There are no homeless people lying or camping out in the public right-of-way. There is no human feces on the street. And there's certainly no one shooting up or using any illicit drugs in public. Now, if you look at my city's principles, which include principles on homelessness, you see these principles are the key to understanding why our policies work and why we don't have the issues San Francisco has. Number 1, no St. Petersburg child should be on the street, which there aren't. Number 2, those St. Petersburg residents who are temporarily homeless due to unemployment or financial downturn should have access to temporary shelter so long as they work to transition back to self-sufficiency. Number 3, those St. Petersburg residents whose homelessness results from alcohol or drug addiction should have access to treatment and shelter so long as they are willing to work to change their behavior and return to self-sufficiency. And we have plenty of those facilities as well. Number 4, those St. Petersburg residents whose homelessness results from mental illness should have access to treatment and shelter with an effort to make them as self-sufficient as possible. We have that as well. Number 5, while addressing the homeless status of St. Petersburg residents, our city should not become a community that attracts homeless individuals from outside the city. And this principle goes hand in hand with the next one, which is number 6, in St. Petersburg, homelessness shall not be an excuse for allowing public behavior harmful to our community. And this principle is the one liberals don't seem to get. And unlike in San Francisco, in my city, this principle is applied through laws which are strictly enforced. For example, basically it's against the law to panhandle within city limits. And you can't sleep or even sit on a sidewalk, alley, or any public right-of-way. And you can't have a tent on public property without a permit. A few years ago, when well-meaning liberals began donating tents to the homeless began making a tent city under a bridge. As you can see, that didn't last long as the cops cut them up and threw them away. Now, before anyone turns this video off mumbling how much of a dick I am for being pro-policies like this, please hold your horses, because I'm about to show you what real compassion looks like. And it's not this. It's not what you see in San Francisco. First, you're not going to go hungry being homeless in my city. Just in the downtown area and within walking distance of each other, there are several places that serve free meals to the homeless, or even to people who aren't homeless, but just need a little help. There's a Salvation Army that serves breakfast, lunch, and dinner daily. There's the Pentecostal mission that does dinner Monday through Saturday. There's also St. Vinny's that does breakfast, lunch, and dinner daily as well. And if you're wondering how I know all this, I used to volunteer at a homeless mission back in the day. Plus, I've talked to what seems like 100,000 homeless people in my years living and roaming around downtown St. Pete for the last quarter of a century. Okay, then there's Daystar, a Catholic charity that'll give you a couple of bags of groceries if you need it. I guess that counts. They also help in pretty much every other way. They have a sort of post office where you can get your mail sent to and pick it up if you don't have an address. They'll help you get an ID. They have clothes if you need clothes, bus passes, even help with past due utility bills. Hannah's Homeless does the same thing, but on a smaller scale. Same with the free clinic. And then there are all the churches that serve meals once or twice a week. The thing with those places is the meals are a real treat compared to the shelter meals. The Elevator Church serves a buffet-style breakfast on Saturday mornings. The homeless call it the Elevator Church because you have to take an elevator to get to the dining hall. The Unitarian Church has what I've heard is a great buffet-style dinner on Saturdays. And the Black Church is all the rage with their home-cooked, all-you-can-eat breakfast on Sunday mornings. And by the way, the homeless call it the Black Church because, you guessed it, it's a black church. Because of the congregation, of course, not the color of the building. Now, when it comes to homeless shelters, there are special places if you have an addiction problem. There are places just for women and children. And there are plenty of places for men as well. Okay, a few shelters that I can think of offhand is the Salvation Army, which will let you stay for a month without even having to look for a job or join their program. St. Vincent's, better known as St. Vinny's, same thing. The Pentecostal mission, same thing. Except no one ever stays there because they don't have TV and because they make you go to a 2.5-hour church service every night. The sheriff's department even has a shelter, and that's also the place the cops take you if you're homeless and busted sleeping on the sidewalk. Of course, you don't have to break the law to stay there. You can just show up on your own volition.
It's a great opportunity for people to get control of their lives again. They will be able to come here and have a place to shower, to be clean, to have food 3 times a day, and a safe, most importantly, safe place to sleep.
Though residents can enjoy flat-screen TVs, recreational yards, books, and board games, the primary objective is to connect guests with the resources they'll need to quit life on the streets and get back on their feet again.
Everybody that comes in here will be assigned a case counselor, which is a good thing, and then they'll evaluate the individual's particular needs and do an assessment, make referrals if necessary to other service providers. We would help them get employment. We will have an employment provider on site here, screening individuals to be employed in the community. And of course, some folks might need alcohol or substance abuse rehabilitation, and we will work with them and service providers for that. And some folks have mental health issues, and we'll work with them on that.
The facility opened with nearly 30 guests. After a week, the number expanded to 50. In time, officials will allow up to 250 residents to call Pinellas Safe Harbor home.
There's one more shelter I want to mention, This one came into being because the Catholic Church owned 10 acres of undeveloped land in the middle of our county and developed it to house the homeless. 10 acres, by the way, is about 5 football fields side by side, and then 5 more football fields side by side above the first 5. It's a lot of space. Anyway, at first they used 250 or so tents to shelter people. Then they began building cottages for those who showed real enthusiasm to better themselves. And then they began building actual apartment buildings with regular apartments for those who found a job or who get a disability check or something and have outgrown the cottages. Last I checked, they had built over 200 of the apartments, which are fully furnished and rented for about $280 a month, including utilities. Now what's cool is a few years ago they began replacing the tents with container apartments. So now a homeless person starts off in a container, and then they have a goal to move into a cottage, and then another goal to move into an apartment. And then eventually, when they're ready, and there is no specified time limit, when ready, they can leave the compound completely and rejoin the rat race. And since you gotta be wondering what the hell a container apartment is...
This is a look at Pinellas Hope's newest transitional housing, and wait until you see what it's made of. Fox 13's Anjali Davis explains how crews are turning old trash into treasured homes for the homeless.
It's a common sight a stone's throw from Tampa's cruise ships. Discarded shipping containers piled high along Adamo Drive. But now one-trippers are finding a second life at Pinellas Hope. They're turning old containers into housing for the homeless.
It is just a raw container from the port of Tampa.
The homeless shelter run by Catholic Charities is buying up old containers and welding them into safe places for residents to stay. Each shipping container is converted into 3 individual homes. From start to finish, they break up the shell of the container into the temporary housing in a matter of 7 days.
We cut all the doorways, cut the windows out for the air conditioners, weld it all up. Goes into our shop, and then we start framing, insulation, electrical.
Right now, they have 5 containers divvied up into 15 individual rooms for residents.
They're not wasting their money maybe in a motel, and it's just the next step up preparing them for their forever home.
Each unit is outfitted with a small AC unit, LED lighting, and a lock on the door. Plus, Pinellas Hope says it's a much safer alternative to their tent city during storm season. The metal shelters could eventually replace the majority of their tents, and while it's certainly a no-frills stay, the tiny square space is an answered prayer at Pinellas Hope.
The last thing about Pinellas Hope I want to add is, like most shelters in the St. Petersburg area, Pinellas Hope is not a chaotic, city-run flophouse for the homeless, like you might find in San Francisco or New York City. And that's because we understand the difference between a hand out and a hand up. Now, staying focused just on this specific shelter, the goal isn't only sheltering and feeding homeless people. The goal is to make available the tools so they can get themselves back on their feet. And those tools not only include things like clean clothing and GED classes, but rules and boundaries. So when you look at the big picture, which isn't just having shelters like Pinellas Hope or Safe Harbor, it's about the whole system. Our whole system in St. Petersburg is structured to get homeless people back on their feet. That's why zero tolerance panhandling, drug use, and not allowing people to sleep on sidewalks is real compassion. And enabling people to remain in a state that's not fit for a human being is not compassion.
This is a lot better than being up underneath the bridge. I tell you, they feed you, they give you a place to take a shower.
Normal lives back, no matter how we lost them. We want to get back into an apartment, into our homes, or in our own income.
It's a godsend, and if this place wasn't here, I don't know what would have happened.
This place has so much to offer if you just apply yourself to it.
So we're like a little small city.
What works is that when the individuals come in, the majority of them have an idea in their mind that they don't matter and that no one cares. And we establish with them that we do care and that they matter. And we instill in our clients a sense of worth and also a sense of community. We feel like anybody who starts something up after us and talks to us is going to save a ton of money and time, because we can tell them all the things that don't work, but we also can tell them what does work and what is important.
And then you actually have to want it. Like, you have to want to better your life.
At first, 20-year-old Darian Lee wasn't sure if Pinnell's Hope was right for him.
I'm going to be honest, I was like, no, I'm not coming there. I'm not a type of person that does woods and tents and stuff.
He dropped out of college and was kicked out of his mother's house because of his drug and alcohol abuse. After 2 weeks on the street, he was put into a rehabilitation program. A social worker recommended Pinnell's Hope.
I expected to be like, oh, these people are just here to pretty much like accept the paycheck, not really truly care. But that's like the opposite. They care too much, if that makes sense. I feel like I don't want to let them down by not actually doing it, because everything they do for me. So it's like, I have no choice but to do it.
There are good ideas and bad ideas, and ideas become ideologies and shape the culture of a civilization and the principles and policies of a society. So it's important to participate in politics and vote. And when you vote, remember, people who don't understand what real compassion is should not be in power, nor should people who don't know why socialism fails time and time again, nor should people who don't understand that diversity has nothing to do with skin color, or where things like real self-esteem comes from. I mean, how does someone not get that you don't build character and self-esteem in kids by putting them in environments where they aren't challenged? And that real self-esteem isn't found in a participation trophy, but that real self-esteem has to be earned. So what if a kid fails at something? They can learn to try harder, or they can find something they're good at. A kid who sucks at sports might have a gift for music. And by the way, that's what real diversity is.